big compound.
Rob,
It makes
have a
little
ride
sense.
home?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's the signal, folks. I'd like to call the Wednesday, September 9th, 2020 meeting of the Moscow Planning and Zoning Commission to order. And begin by saying that we have two new members, and they're going to have to help me with their last names. One is our city deputy liaison for Jennifer. What's your last name, Jennifer? Fleischman. And we have Dave in the back room, and I don't, help me with his last name. Harlan. What's that? Harlan. Dave Harlan is our tech support, and so welcome to both of them. Thank you for the support you provide us. And so with that, we'll begin with, and one more thing. We want to thank Mayor Lambert for recognizing the commission's work with a nice note, if you all want to look at it, and also each coffee cups. So thank you, Mayor Lambert. Okay, I'd like to call to order with approval of the minutes from August 12th, 2020. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions, etc.? Anybody?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Rob. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a tie.
Oh, go ahead.
Dennis. We'll give it to Dennis. Okay, Dennis seconds, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Okay, minutes carried. Next, we have item 2, which is public comment, and this is an opportunity for members of the public to speak before the commission about matters that are not currently on our agenda or currently pending before planning and zoning. And we have one person in the audience. David, are you wanting to speak during this time? Okay. So just a reminder to people who might be listening, that's an opportunity to come talk to us. Okay, item 3 is our public hearing, a legislative hearing providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code Title 4, Chapter 3, providing for the amendment of the Telecommunications Code to establish standards for small wireless facilities. Mike Ray will give a presentation.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. So before you tonight, we have a public hearing, and this is amending Title 4, Chapter 3 of the zoning code, and it's regarding insertion of small wireless facilities in our existing telecommunications code. So just a little bit of background. Looking at historically, cellular communication systems were designed to transport voice communication. That communication was easily handled with those high macrocell communications towers. And then as technology evolved, wireless data has grown, or the demand has grown. Those legacy towers are being overwhelmed with wireless data traffic. And so you can kind of see the scale. You know, usually this is 60 to 100 foot towers for the macro cells. The small cell towers are substantially less than that. And new 5G high-speed deployment will bring much higher data speeds and traffic. And then to meet this increased demand, providers are deploying new small cell installations to accommodate the data demand. So just a review of what we've currently experienced in Moscow as far as the existing cellular towers, and these are macro cell towers. These are kind of the older models with the antenna hanging off the side. This, I believe, is in East Side Marketplace on the back side of the mall there. And then this is over by A and Baker vicinity, and that's more of a stealth tower. So all the equipment and antenna are located on the inside of that tower. And then we also see a lot of structure-mounted antennas. So at the top of Theophilus Tower, there's a ton of cellular antennas on top of that facility, as well as the McConnell building downtown. And then in a lot of our parks, we have wireless provider equipment. It's usually mounted to the side rails of the various water towers that are within the parks. So this gives you kind of an idea of what other communities are experiencing as far as small cell installations and what those look like on existing poles. So this would just be a standard telephone pole. You can see the existing and the proposed, adding an antenna modification to the top and a shroud for equipment on the side. And these are more modern styles. So you can see the existing street light. That's called a cantenna, so it contains the antenna on the top. And then the equipment is likely contained within the pole itself. More of a historical street light with a cantenna on the top. And then another example of, I believe this is in New York City, with the antenna on the top, existing street light, and then this would just be a standalone tower for a small cell. It doesn't contain a street light or any other communications facilities on it. But there are visual clutter concerns. Trying to move away from those images. That's why a lot of communities implement aesthetic and requirements for a minimum number or maximum number of shrouds and antenna on top of the facilities. So looking at our existing telecommunications code, it really doesn't address small cell facilities. They would be included under the umbrella of the existing really macro cell intended facilities. Looking at our objectives for the small cell program: to provide reasonable access to desired services, minimize visual clutter upon utility poles, ensure those installations are aesthetically pleasing as possible, ensure they do not obstruct sidewalks and roadways, do not interfere with light fixture function, and then also to create a permitting system that can facilitate the applications and process those within the allotted time period dictated by the FCC. And then also coordinate with utility and street light owners. So just a review of the Telecommunications Act. Local jurisdictions have to provide telecommunication providers reasonable access in the right-of-way, and we cannot effectively deny their ability to provide service. You have a lot of the larger towers that we have in the city. Those are traditionally located within private property. They're not usually in the right-of-way just because of how large they are. So a little bit greater ability to regulate those previously. And local governments are prohibited from regulating wireless communication facilities based upon radio frequency emissions and effectively prohibiting delivery of telecommunication services. And then just briefly touching on the ruling that was issued at the end of 2018, intended to streamline permitting of 5G small cell deployments by the FCC. That dictated maximum fees that can be charged for small cell applications. Shot clock, so a time frame that local municipalities need to process applications within. An appeal process for those violations. And coming back to our existing code, currently does not distinguish between macro cell towers and small cell poles. The new towers poles would require a conditional use permit, and so this is just referring to the macro cell towers. Co-location. So just looking at the definition of that, co-location is really just placement of one or more antennas on an antenna support structure, or the placement of an antenna on an antenna tower on which one or more of antennas are already located. So even if you just place one, the current structure does not have any, that would still be referred to as co-location. And an antenna support structure is just really any structure that hasn't been built for the purpose of holding an antenna some other purpose. Could be a light pole, could be a building. Those are antenna support structures. So if you locate an antenna on any structure that was not originally intended to be for antenna, then it would essentially be a co-location. And allowed by right in zoning districts so long as an antenna does not project more than 18 feet above or 8 feet away horizontally from the support structure in residential districts, may project further in commercial districts, and currently no design standards. So looking at what we would insert in the proposed ordinance, we would define small wireless facility. So this was consistent with most other municipalities as well as the FCC definition. Looking at inserting small wireless facility standards, which would apply to new facilities as well as co-location. Looking at the co-location section, so this would be on existing support structures, it would be a permitted use. Antennas could not extend more than 5 feet above and 2 feet horizontally. That includes equipment must be shrouded. Side-mounted equipment requires certain heights above sidewalks and roadways and has limited size in the proposed ordinance. Top-mounted can't extend more than 5 feet in height and limits outside diameter to 14 inches. And then the equipment can't interfere with street lighting. So this is just an example of what we could likely see with the co-location. So an existing utility pole, it's already used for another utility, and then they install an equipment shroud that can contain the antenna, and then another equipment shroud which contains various other equipment hooked to fiber optics in the ground. And then another example of more of a co-location on an existing light pole. So moving on to replacement of existing antenna support structures. So if you have a light pole, say they just remove the entire light pole, but the original use of that pole was dedicated towards a light pole, that would be this qualifier. It's permitted so long as the replacement is the same quality, color, design, style, etc. So, if we have one of the new kind of historic fixtures that you see around the downtown area, and they're replacing that fixture in order to install some small cell equipment on that, they'd be required to replace it similar to what it already exists with the existing light pole. It has to be the same height, excluding top-mounted antennas. Designed to internally accommodate all equipment. And then we have a section that states that decorative and or historic light fixtures shall not be replaced unless the applicant demonstrate that the proposed replacement antenna support structure will not disrupt or interfere with the visual theme and style of lighting within the surrounding area. And this would just be an example of that section. So assuming this is just going to be a new support structure, contains the light, contains the new pole, as well as the antenna on the top, and then all the equipment's essentially contained within the pole itself. So new small wireless facility antenna towers. So this is just really a new tower that's explicitly dedicated towards small wireless facilities. There is a 40-foot height limitation unless a conditional use permit's approved. So once the tower goes above 40 feet in height, proposed to be, they'd be required to go with a conditional use permit, which is a public hearing before the Board of Adjustment. It's designed to internally accommodate all equipment, and only one shroud is permitted. It can't be any closer than 250 away from another small wireless facility antenna tower. It does not apply to co-locations or replacement combinations that we just discussed. And then tower shall consist of powder-coated black steel pole and no more than 14-inch diameter antenna shroud. So that's required of the new poles. And that would be an example of what you would see if it was just a standalone small cell facility pole. So you just have the pole and the antenna on the top, equipment cabinet near the base. I just wanted to touch on what's happened up to this point as far as the recommendation from Sustainable Environment. Wendy and I did meet with the Sustainable Environment Commission, and it happened in June of this year. It was more or less to discuss a potential unified recommendation. Sustainable Environment was looking more at the environmental and health consequences of 5G. And we met to discuss that. And SEC ultimately recommended that the Commission continue with the ordinance, which would address mainly safety and aesthetic concerns, and the Sustainable Environment Commission could continue to research and monitor the legal landscape, which is pretty fluid, constantly changing, on radio frequency emissions and then the health effects that you could see. And then a future date, SEC may put forth a recommendation to address health concerns if a legal avenue becomes available. And there's one, we had received quite a bit of public comment over the last few months and incorporated a lot of that. I think we received another round. I've forwarded you all the emails that I received over the last week. There is one item that I just wanted to briefly talk about. Seems to show up in a number of comments that we've received, and it's mainly has to do with just making sure that the facilities fall within the standards that FCC sets for radio frequency emissions. And we already have a section that, when you're going through the permit application and the process, there's already a section where the applicant has to submit documentation demonstrating that that is satisfied and they meet the requirements dictated by the FCC. I had gone through and there was some other examples provided, and we could choose to add some things in that sentence or that paragraph that maybe is a little clearer or ends up enhancing that a little bit. And so just wanted to bring that up for your discussion, but I've gone ahead. I have some additional copies where I've made that change, but just wanted to go through kind of the potential language there, and this is the section that goes through everything that's required when you submit an application. Then the section states documentation. So as it currently reads, it'd just be documentation demonstrating compliance with non-ionizing electromagnetic radiation or radio frequency emissions standards as established by the FCC. Such documentation may be deferred until prior to issuance of building permit, if not available at time of application submittal. We could look at enhancing that by adding just clarifying, so documentation by a certified radio frequency engineer demonstrating compliance with current non-ionizing electromagnetic radiation or radio frequency emission standards as established by the FCC. And then go on at the end to state that once the facility is constructed, city reserves the right to require additional NIER and RF emissions testing by a certified radio frequency engineer to verify that the facility is in compliance with FCC standards. So, not to say that, excuse me, we're going to conduct an annual program where it's tested, but just opening the door in the future, if there's an issue with one of the facilities and questioning whether or not it meets the standard dictated by the FCC, allowing the city to essentially require the company to provide another test from a certified radio frequency engineer in that regard. So just wanted to put that out there for your consideration, just based upon the comments.
Can I, since we're on that, can I ask you a question about it, which would be, if the FCC standards should change and become more stringent, I'm wondering if we should expressly state that the existing infrastructure would need to be upgraded to meet them and would need to be tested by.
I think that. Well, I inserted current in there in the beginning, and I wanted to, my intention was to capture that.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming that if the FCC changes the standard for emissions, they're going to dictate when the old facilities need to come into compliance. And whatever they choose to do in that regard is going to preempt anything that we have in our regulations. So. Okay. I would be a little uneasy inserting that in our regulations because I think they're going to preempt us anyway as far as if they do change it down the road.
Okay.
I do like this, what you've got there.
Yeah, I think it's a good response to a lot of the concerns.
So with that, brings our recommendation. After conducting the public hearing and consideration of testimony received, recommend approval of the proposed ordinance to City Council. Could certainly be recommending approval with those modifications if you so choose. And with that, I'd certainly be able to answer any questions you have. I had forwarded a number, like I mentioned, a number of public comments that we received over the last week. I do have copies of all those that we received if you want to review those again, or discuss any one in particular.
Right, it seems, would you agree that the recurring themes, and most of them seem to first address health and radiation exposure, obviously. And I think the other being that are asking us to challenge the right to locate the mandate to locate them in residential zones. And if you go back to the federal regulations, it looks like we don't have that choice and so that's, is that how you interpret?
Yeah, I
our
mean,
response?
it appears that some other communities are attempting to do that. I don't believe they've been challenged yet. It's just hard, if you can't base the location upon health effects, which we can't, it's hard to make the distinction between the current utility providers like Avista and Frontier that currently have poles throughout residential neighborhoods. And if you've seen, the new poles that are going up, especially on 6th Street and around Lynn Hayes area, the standards contained here are a lot more stringent than we see with other utility providers going up in residential neighborhoods. So if you can't base it upon health effects, and you're basing it solely on aesthetics,
Right, yeah.
these are more stringent than we already have for the existing utilities. So I don't see how you exclude those from certain areas of town.
Okay, does anybody have any questions from the commission for Mike?
Yeah, I guess the 40-foot limit, is that from the base of the pole,
That'd be from grade, correct?
from grade, like from the ground? So these aren't going to be on top of towers and McConnell Building and,
It's unlikely that they will be, no. They could certainly be on the side. I mean, it usually, they're not going to be on the top of buildings just because of the height. But they could certainly be mounted to the side of a building. Seems like the majority of them are on utility poles, though, in the right of way.
so they can get too high, so they're not doing any good? Is that what you're saying? They need to be down that low?
Well, the range is limited, and then, a lot of objects, structures will block the radio frequency waves as well. So, it may not be feasible located on the roof because you have, the roof structure and then other structures that could potentially block the range of the facility, which wouldn't make it feasible.
Okay.
Other questions for Mike from commissioners or comments?
Mike, have you had any contact with Avista to see what their position is?
We have not had contact with Avista, no.
Joel, I can't see you. Do you have any questions?
No questions at this point. I do like the red line additions that Mike was showing us.
Good, yeah, I agree with that. I think that was we needed to clarify the need for regular monitoring of emissions, so I think that is a good addition to the others. And so Mike tells me that the comments that have come in the last 2 days will be attached to the minutes, correct? And so we had several people expressing those concerns, and yeah. Okay, well, if there are no more questions for Mike, I think we'll then open the public hearing and invite probably Mr. Hall to come up if he wants to, or would you like to come up and speak, David, or no? Okay.
Submitted my written, I assume you got
Yeah.
Yes.
Got it.
Um,
Thanks.
something more to add?
Okay, well, since there's no one else here in the audience, and we've received written comments and reviewed them, most people have had a chance to, I think, I will close the public hearing and leave it to deliberation by the commission.
So as I interpret some of this, a lot of the concern, of course, that has come up has been about the health effects. And what I see, how I see it, is the FCC has determined there are no health ill effects. And so we can't countermand that. That is the determination. If you want to change the law, you got to change. If you don't like a law, you got to change the law. They have to be convinced, and we can't do it, convince them that the health effects would be negative. And so, because I know it writes in here, and people have said, they go to the part of the FCC writing that says, refers to health and safety. And it's not that we ignore the health and safety, it's been determined by the powers that be that it's not ill health. And so until, or if, information comes through that says, oh, nope, there is a problem, then we can't challenge that until that happens, if that happens. And I think that might be a point of clarification for people.
Just a couple of comments. I think that one of the things that I'm seeing is that we've done what we can do in the ordinance, and we're putting tremendous amount of burden on the master service agreement, which is where a lot of I guess, probably the management of the program is going to be on the master agreements. The only thing that I would say is, and I do appreciate the changes that you made, Mike. I think that we've done what we can do here. But one of the things that, and I don't think we can commit to it at this moment, but once we start having some experiences with the master service agreements and seeing the implementation of this, I'd like us to come back and revisit the issue and see if maybe there are some further changes that we could make to the ordinance based on how we see the management of the program going. So I just wanted to lay that out as a eventual possibility, but I'm fine with where we are with this now. I think we've done what we can do.
Well, I think also the city attorney weighed in, and we got sort of a read of what's possible, and it's I guess the city would be positioned subject to possible legal suits if we try to kind of go against that advice, and it's really up to the elected officials to determine if the city wants to subject themselves to, rather than those of us who are not elected.
I would also like to thank Mia and mention that we have gone to Mia Baptista, is that how you say her last name now? A number of times on this issue. Right. So we have responded to the public asking for better clarification, and we have sought that and received it, and appreciate that.
And at this point, I think we're able to at least address monitoring of radio frequency emissions, but we're not able to address prohibiting installation in any zone. It's just it's pretty clear in the FCC regulations. So unless we have a different, well, I won't go there. Unless we have a different FCC chair, I don't think there's much hope on that. Anyway, is anybody else want to make a comment, or? Okay, well, are we ready to move forward, do you think, or?
I think we're.
Yes.
Okay, can I entertain a motion to approve the ordinance with or without the?
This is Joel. I will move that we send the draft to council for their perusal, and that we include the red line additions that Mike has shown us.
Thank you, Joel. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mike. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. thank you for all your work on this, Mike, and for the commissioners too, going back and forth and trying to listen to public concerns as much as we can. We really appreciate the public expressing their opinions and, you know, and going to a lot of trouble in some cases to make suggestions, so.
In fact, they sent so much information that they involved 2 commissions, including Sustainable Environment, which is ongoing.
Right.
And so it's not a dead issue, it's ongoing in
Right.
terms of their concerns.
Right, good, okay. All right, so we move on to item 4, which is public art lighting discussion, and Mike Ray's going to give a presentation. Oh, you're back, Joel. Good.
Thank you again, Madam Chair, Commissioners. So this is the topic that we're covering is a proposal to look at our current lighting ordinance for some recent public art that's been installed in the city. Just to go through a little background, our most recent public art project is titled The Homecoming, and that's located at the couplet of C and Main Street. It's the newest addition to the City of Moscow's public art collection. It was by Jennifer Corio and Dave Fry of Vancouver, Washington, and they designed, fabricated, and installed that earlier this year. Part of the artist's scope included the creation of a lighting proposal for the site, and then they recommended 3 fixtures installed at ground level, each of those focused on curved panel mounted above to highlight those at night. And this was the installation, if you haven't seen it yet. Just at that north couplet location.
What are the 3 panels that they want to?
These are the 3 panels here. Those are intended to represent the rolling hills
gotcha.
of the Palouse. Yeah. And then these were some installation pictures, and then these were the plans that they submitted as part of the proposal. So you can see this is just an overhead shot, probably looking from the same direction, but looking at installing mainly 3 fixtures here at ground level in front of each of those panels so that the light can be directed at the hill, causing some shadowing on the hills behind. And then another view. And they say that the options could be adjustable, well lights or accent lights with enough beam spread to spotlight the hill it's aimed at. And then just another view. And then this is just a kind of a representation of what it may look like, kind of highlighting the hills at nighttime. And so I'd sent out earlier this week a memo from our arts department, Megan Cherry, just asking the commission to explore the options of uplighting for public art locations, and then just looking at a couple other locations that we have in town. These are some of our prominent public art projects that we already have installed. So we've got the water spout. This is at Fire Station number 3 as you enter town from the north. And then the Helioterra, which is at the south couplet by the Wren Welcome Garden. So that's currently, it's a rather dark. You can see all the different layers of rammed earth during the day, like in this picture. But at nighttime, it's rather dark, and you don't get that that effect with all the intricacy in the layers of that piece. So she was pointing to kind of those 2 locations as potential locations that would benefit from uplighting. So taking a look at our current outdoor lighting ordinance, it typically, all outdoor lighting in the city is required to be full cutoff, designed, installed, maintained in order to prevent light trespass upon adjacent properties or the public street. looking at residential zoning districts, we do allow some exemptions within the residential zones. So if it's a certain number of lumens, so say 400 lumens, limited to and partially shielded, that's permitted in residential zones. 2,000 lumens, wall-mounted, but it's below an opaque eave, that would be permitted as well. Angled floodlights, not more than 25 degrees from vertical, really with no maximum lumen requirement. Partially shielded floodlight on a timer. So if you have a timer just between pretty much the, I think, the midnight hours, certainly allowed for that. A luminaire on a motion sensor.
Mike, would you define full cutoff?
Full cutoff per our code is no light projecting upon the projected horizontal plane at the top of the fixture. So you would draw, you'd have your light fixture, you'd draw an imaginary horizontal plane at the top of it, and no light's allowed to project above that horizontal plane.
So for the dark sky?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Usually it comes into play, you've seen a lot of fixtures go towards, just since so many other communities, we've been dark sky requirements for quite a while, but as you've seen more and more communities go towards dark sky ordinances, you really see a lot of the fixtures going that direction, so it's not really hard. I'm sure Scott could speak to this a lot more, but really seen a lot more fixtures going towards full cutoff requirements. A little more challenging if you have wall packs, just to make sure that they're full cutoff, but there are certainly a lot of options out there for that. And then non-residential zoning districts, a lot of the commercial districts, really this is, you have quite a bit of flexibility in the residential zones, but when you get to commercial, really most of the projects for outdoor lighting are required to be full cutoff. Some of the exemptions that we have is for outdoor sign lighting, just as long as the source of illumination shall not be visible. So we have a lot of maybe districts that are close to residential areas that have commercial uses that have exterior, maybe freestanding or monument signs that aren't allowed to be internally lit, so they're externally lit. And sometimes you see it mounted from the top of it for full cutoff, but oftentimes you'll see it down at the base, shining up at the sign. And so we give an exemption or exception for that. Usually they'll place some rocks around that fixture in the ground, just so, thinking of adjacent people driving, it's not blinding because you can't see the source of illumination. It's just projecting up against the sign. So that's currently what we have for outdoor signs. And then flagpoles have an exception as well. So taking a look at if the commission chose to move forward with, maybe inserting some exemptions for, against full cutoff requirements for public art, you could insert requirements such as maybe a limited number of lumens for the fixtures, and then maybe copy the sign code which limits restricts the visibility of the illumination and requires that to be shielded to a certain extent. But really just wanted to kind of go over the art department's thoughts on uplighting for public art. I think it'd be a good benefit to enjoy a lot of these pieces at nighttime instead of just during the day, especially in the winter months when it gets dark at 4:30. And so just wanted to bring their proposal to the commission and see if it was something that certainly wanted to direct staff to explore an amendment that we could make that would potentially allow public art to be uplit.
Yes, Rob?
I would really like to see these lit, and uplighting seems to be the most appropriate. And, I get confused between the full cutoff and the uplighting because I guess, Scott, that's an incompatible, with downlighting you can have the full cutoff, but not with uplighting.
Correct. You can limit, if you do a well light,
Yeah.
you can limit, where you're shining down a street. You sink it into a well. You can get pretty good coverage.
Yeah, I guess, seems to me that the easiest way to approach this is going through it with an exemption, just like we do with the flag poles. And it would probably be a easy change to the ordinance and, like Scott's describing, maybe get it down in a well. I mean, design it in a way that it's gonna be aesthetically pleasing and not shining in, particularly since these are in, high-traffic areas, at night. But I would really like to see all of these public art displays illuminated. I think it'd be wonderful.
Other comments?
I agree. And we have made an investment in the arts and in these displays, and let's use them more fully and get them lit at night.
I would agree also, as long as it's not, shining in the eyes of drivers. I mean, that it's, obviously
Well-
in some way designed to prevent that from happening and,
This is Joel.
Hi, Joel.
I am a dark sky advocate, and I guess I worry a little bit about the public response to seeing uplighting proliferate, and whether that's going to make more people wonder why they can't uplight their building and so on. This may be a slippery slope, but I guess I'm intrigued by the possibilities of focusing the light. I guess I'm thinking about the new structure at the north end of the couplet, and wondering whether anything can be designed that keeps most of the light actually focused on the particular bands of metal that they are talking about illuminating, rather than light heading off into the sky. I'm not quite sure what is possible with the shrouding and so on. So I guess I'm a little bit dubious, but I do like public art, so I'm conflicted, and but I don't want to see our Black Sky initiatives diluted.
I don't think we'll ever have enough art to undarken the sky.
well, I think what Joel's maybe saying is, where does art stop and architecture begin? Then you start illuminating the facades of buildings because they should be seen. And, I mean, that
Yeah,
might be a
yeah.
path that could happen. And so,
I think I had a teacher in grade school say something about, you make rules, but no rules are 100%. There will always be some exceptions, and part of the point of a rule is to contain the 95%, so that you then can work with the exception.
so would it be better, do you think, to go look at them on a case-by-case basis for approval? Well, I guess that would be a conditional use permit, or how would that work? If it wasn't just a blanket, the Arts Commission can light up any
Yeah, I mean,
piece.
I think that if you didn't want to just insert something in the code that exempted public art from full cutoff requirements, yeah, I mean, you could certainly go that route of going through a conditional use permit and have the Board of Adjustment review it in order to approve lighting
It's
of
more
public
onerous,
art.
obviously. I'm just wondering,
I mean, just thinking of the necessarily expertise of the Board of Adjustment, not necessarily, experts in that field, and then just the simplicity of probably most of the projects. I don't know if that would warrant that level of review by a city commission or board. So that would be my concern with that. I mean, if you were concerned about a proliferation of these with just, I think original intention was that it would just be city-owned art,
I see.
displayed on behalf of a governmental agency that would, be able to have the uplighting, not necessarily somebody puts a mural on the side of their building and all of a sudden they're allowed to have uplighting. It was more intended for just these public art projects that the city has
So a
developed.
city-sponsored public art project, yeah.
Yeah, you could certainly make that
Yeah.
explicitly clear in the ordinance, sure.
I think it needs to be made that way, or it could get out of hand.
Sure.
But I like that idea. I think we need to maybe run this by the city attorney, because if all of a sudden, we're saying public art is only a city function versus, because there's other public art around town even. So I just want to make sure that we could say the city-sponsored public art that goes through the Arts Commission, if we could exclusively have that without running into some legal problem with private public art.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean,
Non sequitur, I
yeah,
guess.
we could certainly run that by the city
Okay.
attorney, for sure.
Rob, you're,
Yes.
you're describing my slippery slope.
Yes.
Mike had a
Well,
comment.
and Rob's comment about there's more art around town, so many of those lighting projects can be done within the parameters with the cutoff points, and I was thinking of some of the artwork on the side of the building and stuff, those could be lighting with down.
Downlighting instead of
Yeah.
uplighting, yeah.
You're really talking about these three right now, where all would need the exemption. And I think each one would be evaluated as we went, depending on the terminology of how this was written. But to me, let's get them lit where people can see them, and I understand Joel's concern, but public art to be reviewed, what do we need to do?
Yeah.
I'd like to see some investigation of the possibility of shrouding to minimize what I'm concerned about.
I believe we have an expert on the commission, so.
I'll try to find some areas and get some pictures.
That
That'd
would
be
be
great.
great. That would be very helpful.
I would say that I had assumed that you were talking about city public art, so good point, Rob, that needs to be clear.
Sure.
And I don't know if there's some other entity besides Board of Adjustment, that would be one. But I mean, I don't know that Transportation Commission would be able to cover all the driver parts, and that doesn't cover the dark sky part, so whoever it is that,
Maybe it's the zoning administrator. I don't
Well, yeah, the
know.
lighting code is just administered by the zoning administrator unless there's a portion of it that requires a conditional use permit, then it's the Board of Adjustment. But, yeah, I didn't really foresee this being anything other than providing, maybe putting some standards in there for public art owned by the city, and then just having our department administer it, not necessarily running it through a review. Obviously, the arts department is pretty involved in that, and any type of lighting that gets installed would have to be reviewed, and they would pretty much direct, how that would be installed, and as well as our facilities, who would install it as well, so.
It would be interesting to see how public art is actually defined, because when I think of public art, I think of it as being on public properties. I mean, not just on somebody's private property that the public can enjoy from the sidewalk. It's usually on, all over cities everywhere, it's usually on city-owned property.
It'd probably just be art owned and maintained by the public.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, any other questions for this? Should we move on to the next item, or you have? Or what, I should.
work on it.
I'm comfortable with maybe bringing it back next time and
Yeah.
start more of a discussion about
Yeah.
coming up with maybe a maximum lumen or, other type of language in the,
Yeah.
I'll take a crack at the ordinance and then bring it back next time.
Great, that'd be good. Okay, item 5 is review of draft sign code status. And we left this a while ago, I
We
guess.
did, yeah, and I'm gonna have to apologize, I think we're gonna have to table this for the next meeting as well. I almost had the completed draft done by this meeting, but got tied up with other projects that I had going on, so, if you don't mind, we can table it to the next meeting and then, go through the whole thing.
Sounds good. Okay, item 6, Transportation Commission meeting report. Joel, do you have anything to report from the transportation?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
the Transportation Commission will be meeting with some attending by Zoom on tomorrow,
Okay, via
for-
Zoom, okay.
4 to 6 in the room where you're sitting.
Okay,
The items on the agenda, the main one is a review of the code, the city's code, which defines what the Transportation Commission is and does and its membership. It turns out that the code specifies about 20 different people who are ex officio members of the Transportation Commission. And Wendy, you have been for years a ex officio
Yeah.
member of the Transportation Commission.
right, and you all meet the same time that Historic Preservation normally does, which hasn't been meeting either.
We will be talking about substantially paring down the ex officio membership to people who have actually attended in recent years. We will also be reviewing the city's capital improvement plan and budgets, looking at transportation-related items. And we will be electing officers for the Transportation Commission, given that both the board chair and vice chair have had to resign. So we need some new officers for the Transportation Commission for the remaining months of this year. So we will be meeting.
Okay, well, life goes on, I guess. Item 7, announcements. Does anybody have any?
I would mention, I'm so excited that the commission survey is out. I got one. I never get one, so I get to fill one out. So anybody out there, the 1,200 people who receive these surveys, please fill them out. We take them seriously. Gives us some direction of what you all want us to do. So I just would mention that I know it's out because I got one.
Right, great. And I would just mention that if you want to look at Bill's note that goes with the cups, Joel, there's one here for you that maybe we should leave with Jennifer, and you can pick it up. We are coming by Zoom, but we'll leave it with Jennifer, and you can pick it up at some point. And there's one for Nels also. But if anybody would like to see the note, I'll pass it around there. And I guess with no other items, David, you didn't want to make an announcement about something, so I've accidentally left you out once or twice, and I apologize. At any rate, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.